So I'm going to go through the platform, how to choose the platform, what is your site built on? Then we're going to talk about site mapping. Then we're going to talk about the planning, the integrations and interactivity, then the wireframing step, the mockup step, the development step, and then testing and launching. Those are kind of all the major steps and stages in a redesign project. So it looks like most of you are 60% are right now planning for a redesign. So that's good. Hopefully this is very helpful to you. Switch the poll again here. I'm gonna ask about content planning tools. That's the content planning tools are becoming more common now. So the first major step in the redesign process is what is the website going to be built on, right? CMS, meaning content management system. What platform? So I would consider your organization requirements, right? What do you require as an organization? Do you need your staff to be able to update the site? You know, any part of the site, homepage text, blogs, newsletters, you know, whatever, the donation page, to be able to add different donation options. You know, what do you need to do? What do you plan on outsourcing? You know, most nonprofits, because, you know, you have, you know, restrictions on budgets and other things, you really do need to control your entire site to be able to do anything on it, edit any piece. So consider your requirements, consider how are you going to collect donations? Are you going to collect it on the site? Do you have a third-party system? What other third-party tools does it have to integrate with? Do you have a sort of a system for collecting contacts? Do you have a contact management system? Email newsletter system? Do you have a donation platform where you keep information on donors? You know, what does this have to integrate with? And then for sure, avoid anything that is not supported well by a large community of third-party people, just in case something happens. You're working with a vendor and it's great and they build your site, but then they disappear, which has happened to, unfortunately, many of my clients. So if that vendor disappears and the platform you used isn't well known or it was proprietary, you could be in serious trouble. And pay attention to, is the platform currently supported? For instance, Drupal ended up end of lifing, you know, discontinuing a couple major versions of their platform, which like millions of websites were using. And that is very dangerous to be on a platform that's outdated. That means there's no more security support for it. There's no new updates coming out or anything. So the platform is the first major consideration. Then we're going to talk about the sitemap. The sitemap is the next stage. This is a visual map, an organizational structure of every page on your website, and usually different features and elements of the main navigation too, and where things link off to other sites, or where calls to action are, or forms or embedded content. So you can see this sitemap has a little ledge in there. We make a little key, a little guide, so people can look at the sitemap and really understand it well. So we talked about personas and that strategy work. These two strategy pieces are really tied together. The sitemap is the first major strategy thing that is about the organization of your site, and it has to tie back very closely to the audience, right? Every audience that you have for your site, donor, volunteer, or, you know, participant in your program, whatever, those need to have pathways represented in your sitemap. And if you want people to come to your site and do an action, if you want your site to drive action, the sitemap's really important. You need to make sure you have the right number of pages to support the different types of content, the different types of audiences, and that there's logical linking from page to page and section to section to bring those audience peoples through a certain pathway to encourage them to take actions. So this is also helpful for planning the subnav, how the subsections are going to work. And don't forget about site search. How is your site going to be searched? It's funny because ideally your site is so intuitive, nobody needs to search it with a keyword, right? But this is very important to Google. Site search on your site, having a search box on every page, easily accessible and good search results, is actually something Google is now paying attention to. So that's quite important. Looks like 0% said you have a content planning tool. That's actually been kind of quite common. So unfortunately, a lot of them cost money, but they are useful. I'm going to switch the poll here again. So the next thing is the integrations. We talked a little bit about that in the platform, making sure your platform supports the integrations. Now, I will say this, a redesign is the perfect time to look at your integrations. How do you want to change it? Do you have a calendar system, event system, donation system, or social media interactions, whatever? I'm showing you a picture here of a client, MindBody Solutions. We redesigned their site. They ended up bringing the donation platform in-house, part of the site. You don't need to leave it anymore. They ended up bringing the calendar and event system inside the site. They don't need to use third-party systems anymore. So you may think that you need to rely on Eventbrite or some third-party thing now, but when you go through a redesign, it's very likely that we can bring that into your site, not have to have people leave the site, and make it a lot more intuitive for users. So it looks like most of you said you're not sure about platform yet, but almost the majority have said WordPress, which is pretty common. WordPress has pretty much become the de facto standard now for nonprofit sites, and I highly, highly recommend WordPress. That is what we use. So interactivity, this is another thing you want to do in the planning stage. You want to plan this out. You know, what is the form tool you're going to use? Where are you going to have forms? How are you going to collect that data? How are you going to have CTAs that drive people to those forms to collect data? Are you going to use pop-ups? Are you going to have chat or other interactive features? And consider the accessibilities of these. You may have a chat thing you really like, or you may have a pop-up system you really like, but they're not accessible. So vet any third-party system or plugin or tool you're going to use for accessibility before you decide on it, right? And then another thing when you get into sort of designing is if you know you're going to use these other third-party tools, pay attention to, can you change the look of them? Can you tweak the settings of these tools and make them really match your new redesign? That's another important step. So the next step, kind of once you've figured out your sitemap, you have a visual representation, the hierarchy of your site, you know what's going to be in the main navigation, the sub-navigation, you know the third-party tools you're using, the interactive tools you're using. Now it's the wireframes. Now the wireframe is when you really start to lay out and figure out how our page is going to look. What are we going to have in the home page, the about page, the contact page, those different pages. So this is a skeleton. There's very little design. These are usually monochrome, no colors. And this is a step where having content already written is very important. Now, we're not even into really design yet in colors, but already we want some content. And I'll show you why. And this step is where you define those unique layouts. So you can see here's some wireframes for a nonprofit. And this is real content. This is the real content they wrote. And this is helpful. Now we know how much space do we have to put different content in. We're going to have these three major areas for their three audiences. They define that in the sitemap. Then it comes to the wireframe, content through design. They are doing a very good job through this strategic planning phase. You'll see as you know, representing the different audiences. So having the content ready to be able to put real content in there is super useful. And you'll see this page has a little bit of Latin. There's a tiny bit of Latin just because they know we need a paragraph here. This is how much space we're going to have. We don't have it quite written yet, but we've got the H1 written, the calls to action written, these buttons written. We know where the chat's going to go. We know where the H2 is going to go to. We know what's going to be linked in the content. So they've already had that content ready that is incredibly valuable in this wireframe stage. And you know, interactivity too. This is a pop-up. That's really important. This is one of the main functional pieces of their site. And we're focusing on the functionality before the design. We're paying special attention to inclusivity too, and challenging any biases or assumptions about how something should function. You know, we're breaking things down to make sure that you know, all the audiences that we need to serve are going to be represented and understand how these functions work. So wireframes are great for focusing on the user. How's the user going to actually use the site, ingest the content, see different things, interact with the calls to action. Basically, wireframes are a huge step in helping your visitors get what they need easily. The easier your redesigned site is for people to use, the more effective it is overall. Here's another wireframe we did, which was a very complicated piece. It's kind of the main guts of the site, the main place people go to use the functional piece of the site. Thank you for the polls there. I'll switch it again. I think I've got another one coming up here. All right, switch that poll. Not many left. So once the wireframe is all done, you've wireframed out your unique pages and different layouts, and you've got the blocks there. Then it comes to actually designing the site. This is the fun part where a lot of people get really excited, you know. So this is the mockups, and mockups are high fidelity, full color representations of what the actual page is going to look like. So now the number one problem we find with design is trying to over design, trying to have a whole bunch of design elements in there just to kind of make things not seem plain or unique, you know, make things look unique or something. But you know, the best design sites, you know, the design is actually kind of minimal, and each design element is really very functional and has a purpose behind it. So the design stage is fun, and we're not going to do a mock-up of every single page, right? That just wouldn't be time efficient or budget efficient. But what we're going to do is we're going to mock up the major pages. For sure, the home page, and then at least one interior content page, and kind of a few other pages, right? So we're going to do full mock-ups, and when we go to development and these mock-ups are turned into an actual functioning website, they will look exactly like this. And if you've ever seen that happen where you get a design, but it looks different once it's in your browser, that's a sign that maybe something went wrong in the development, and maybe the developers and designers are not really communicating well enough. What we do is it's all in-house, and sometimes it's actually the same person. You know, we have what they call full stack developers. Well, they can go from sitemap to wireframe to design to development. They can kind of do it all, which does build in some efficiencies. And you want to mock up how video is going to look, photography. If possible, use real photos for your designs, real photos of real people, real participants, real donors, like whatever. Use real photos. If you can, avoid using stock photos. And then we kind of get into the developments. So that's where we're going to take the mockup and turn it into a functioning website that is going to be handed off to developers and actually, you know, built into WordPress, right? So here's my top tips for development. You know, likely you're not going to be doing any of this. It's very unlikely you have any actual sort of web developers on staff. Maybe you do have some designers that participate in design. You probably are going to handle some writing, communication stuff, but you know, it's very unlikely you're going to have any tech people. So choose an expert in the platform. Whatever you do, whatever platform you're doing, if it's Wix or Drupal or WordPress, hopefully it's WordPress. Make sure whoever's developing your site has done like hundreds of them, right? If you go to a developer and they're like, oh yeah, WordPress sounds good. Okay, we've done maybe 1 or 2 WordPress sites. We'll learn this. You know, you don't want on the job learning for your redesign project. You're going to miss deadlines and you know, go over budget and stuff. So choose an absolute expert in the platform, someone that's done like hundreds of the sites in that platform. Make sure you can support the final site. Like I said, make sure the developer understands what you need to control. I've had nonprofits come to us and ask for a website redesign purely because they can't control the site. There's a big chunk on the homepage or a video gallery or slideshow, and the developer hard-coded everything. There's no way for them to update it, which is a huge bummer. Sometimes the sites look really nice. The client just can't edit any of it. So make sure the developer knows how you need to use the site, what you need to control. And in the development stage, test the site performance. Is it fast? Does it load really fast? Is there good accessibility? Is SEO represented? You know, is the SEO stuff dialed in? Do you have H1s, H2s? Is the page structure, how it was built, laid out? Are all the major SEO little elements in place? Can you control the things like the title and the meta description? So I asked a poll about accessibility testing. It looks like none of you yet have done accessibility testing. Well, that's something I would highly encourage. And actually in the follow-up email to this, there's going to be links to more information about accessibility and kind of what that entails. And if you wanted to get a review or audit done, some information for that. So that is kind of the development stage. Those are the really key things you need to pay attention to. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes. And of course, your developer has a lot of work from turning it into a design to a functioning site.